We're fascinated in what happens when everybody lives to 100. That's really the question that Andrew and I asked ourselves 4 years ago. Why do we think it's such an important question? Well, the simple truth is that right around the world, people are living longer. And it's absolutely astounding. Every 10 years, people are living 2 years longer. And that means that if you take that down to a year, it's a couple of months per year. If you take it down to a day, it's like being given a few more hours every single day. And the reason we're saying that rather than it's all about being old is we think that the conversation about the 100-year life has really been hijacked by Alzheimer's and by pensions. And that's not to say both of those are important, but what we want to argue is that when life elongates, it actually elongates. It's not just about what happens at the end of life, it's what happens at every single stage in your life. And we're beginning to see the beginnings of experiments about a profoundly different way of thinking about our lives. And we think it could be a curse, but we see it as an amazing gift. And we want to show you how you make it that amazing gift. And so here is what we know right now. But actually, this is already old dated. You know, if you're born as I was in 1955, then right now you're expected to live to about 88. I'm actually going to live to 100, so I'm unusual in that respect. But you can see already that what we thought about our lives is elongating. And this is the way we see it, is about more productive hours. So if you take out the unproductive things you do in the day, these are the hours that you've got more. And that's actually what we focused our ideas about. We said, what would you do if you had more hours every week? What would you do if you had more hours every year? And what would you do if your whole life suddenly elongated in front of you? And that's happening for people all around the world. And it's a huge challenge, but of course an enormous opportunity. And the first point to say about that, of course, is that if you live longer, then unless you have an extraordinary source of income, which is unrelated to your work, you will have to work longer. And to help us understand what it means to live longer lives, we invented 3 personas. One we call Jack. His life portrays the life that organizations are often based on. You know, he retired at 65 on a pretty good pension. He was then able to live happily on his pension until he passed away sometime in his 70s. He had a traditional life. His wife, Jill, obviously. Jill stayed at home. You see, we have a bit of a Sonny and Cher moment as well. His wife stayed at home whilst Jack was the primary breadwinner. And then we get Jimmy. And actually, Jimmy is now midlife, and we've been talking about this around the world recently. One of our groups said they wanted T-shirts saying, "Je suis Jimmy," because Jimmy actually is many of us, you know, midlife, realizing when he started that he might have been like Jack, retiring at 65, and midlife realizing that suddenly this extraordinary new opportunity but also challenge is ahead of him. And I think for lots of people and for lots of companies, it's Jimmy that's really interesting to them. What does Jimmy now do? And then we have Jane, and Jane's in her early 20s, and in many ways, this is the group that Andrew and I teach at London Business School, and in many ways, you know from your own kids, and those of you who are in your 20s yourself here, that people are sort of getting that their lives are a lot longer. And some of the choices that you see them already making are going to make that change. Now, what does that actually look like? Well, Jack could retire at 65 and still save a relatively small proportion of his income because, of course, Jack was also living in a world where state and corporations gave pensions. But when we come to look at Jimmy, if he wanted to be a Jack and retire at 65, and he has a longer life expectancy, he would have to be saving 17% of his income. And we know that Jimmy is not doing that. So we expect that Jimmy will have to work into his, or will work into his early 70s. So already we see what we consider to be a normal life, a normal 3-stage life, full-time education, full-time work, full-time retirement, beginning to break up. And here's Jane. If Jane wanted to be like Jack and retire at 65, she would have to save around 25% of her income. And of course, Jane isn't doing that. It's unlikely that Jane will ever do that. So again, her working life is going to extend, and we expect Jane to be working into her 70s or her early 80s. So you can see immediately that ideas about what life is, what work is, are going to be changing very fundamentally.